What's up, Markian? I'm Seth with According to Seth. How you doing today?
I'm very well. Thanks. Thanks a lot for having me.
Of course, I absolutely love the movie. I watched it earlier. That ending scared the crap out of me. I always love a good jump scare.
Yeah, yeah, a couple of those, couple of those.
There's a couple of them. I know this is your directorial debut, so what were the challenges of not only being the director but also acting in this?
Yeah, great question. It was a bit of a mind melter at times. I mean, I originally wasn't in this movie. In our early drafts, we had two characters that we eventually, when Sean and I, the writer, Sean Oliver, were chatting. Our goal of the movie being is how far to reality can we blur that line? Like
Mhm.
how close can we walk that line? And that idea kind of came from Sean pitched me one day. He said, I just think you should be in this as an actor and as a director. And I agreed. And I think during the process, not that I was regretting it, it was just a lot. It was super intense shooting because of exactly what you just said of trying to balance being in the scene and present with everybody and in the moment, but at the same time, looking at the monitors, stepping back and making sure that the scenes are kind of all being shaped in the way that I see it from a director standpoint. But I'd say and so yeah, sometimes my brain would melt because there was just 100 things going on that I was juggling at the time, and you have production designers coming up to you, costume designers, everybody's in your ear, and then I'm also trying to learn lines during that whole time and then set up the next shot. But I say that also that it was a gift to be in the scenes with my actors because I think putting my narrative story hat telling cap on, I got to be there and kind of lead my actors into the tone that I wanted to when I was present in the scenes and lead them into the places that I needed them to get, being in the scene itself. So that was the positive that I think that came out of the process was figuring that out and being like, actually, there's a lot of times this is a gift that I'm here that I get to direct through my acting, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot you learned too about like what you can take on for future, directorial roles or acting, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, don't necessarily want to do it again, because I think I'd love to just focus on the directing side of it. This was
Mhm.
a specific project, and why I was in it was really not like a vanity play at all. I think a lot of actor turned directors do that. But this wasn't. This was to serve the narrative, so I was happy to do it.
Yep.
But definitely on the next one, I'd love to just be behind the monitors, I think.
Definitely. And I know you brought up working with some of the other actors. I thought Miranda was absolutely incredible in this movie. And I felt like you could feel all of what she was going through. And for what happened to her brother, we always want answers and closures as humans. We always try to search for those answers. So as a director, how did you try to invoke this realness out of her? I was actually telling Staley earlier that I thought this movie was real at first. So you guys crushed it.
I'm so happy to hear that, Seth. I'm so happy to hear it. That's what we're really trying to do. And that's what I like. That was my goal from the beginning was, again, I just talked about it, blurring that lines of reality. And that was a big part of the audition process with my Terras, which, came to Miranda McDougall because she was able to bring this raw intensity and vulnerability to the part like really really early on as in the audition process.
Mhm.
And I even would improvise with her in the audition in the callback. Her and I just went totally off script as I played the other actor, and I just knew she was it. And during the process, it was a gift to have her because honestly, there wasn't a lot of direction I had to give. She understood the assignment and took a lot of the weight off of me having to guide her, to be honest with you. And she just brought such a heart to that part, which I was looking for, because I think at the end of the day, when anybody watches this movie, it is a bit of a character study, and she is the lead. And we hopefully want to empathize with her journey and understand why she's doing what she's doing. And that only comes through vulnerability to me and feeling like this person and understand what she's going through, which Miranda did in spades. So I'm really happy that you said that. Thank you.
Of course. Listen, I think it's safe to say you're a Blair Witch fan. So, what was it about that film that inspired not only you from like a fan point of view, but also as a director now? And what did you take from that film that kind of like helped you shape the idea of this one?
Yeah, I mean, massive influence. Obviously, you've seen the movie.
Yep.
It comes down to what movies stuck with me when I was a kid, to be honest with you, because
Hmm.
I think like I watch movies as an adult, and I don't know, not that they don't affect me or they wash over me a bit easier. It's not that they're forgettable. It's just for some reason, when you're a kid, there's these movies that everybody talks about that you just can't get out of your head, and they're with you for the rest of your life. And The Blair Witch was one of those movies for me. I was a little young, so I was born in '93. That came out in '99, so I was a little young. So I discovered Blair Witch a little later, and and loved it. And I think what I loved about it was actually, because it was introduced to me a little later, was reading about all the stuff that they did to get that movie going and how it created this cultural phenomenon. I was really intrigued from a filmmaking perspective and narrative perspective. So I wanted to create something, and I call this the 2024 version of it. It's just packaged differently, but the same idea that we're trying to do. And I think on top of the Blair Witch, that stuck with me. The other major influence that I was more present for as a teenager was Paranormal Activity, because they did a really, really interesting narrative marketing scheme online. Specifically, I remember on E-Bombs World. If you've ever,
I remember that. Yeah.
you remember E-Bombs
Yeah.
World? So I would go on there every day after school, and Paranormal Activity put out a bunch of videos online, and it got me hooked right away because I knew deep down that it wasn't real, but it was so much fun. And so being able to engage with that content and then go see the movie, it just added to the whole experience. And I remember seeing Paranormal Activity in theaters and being actually like scared. I think for the
Yeah.
first time, my horror. I have a good, horror, it's hard to scare me. It really is. But that one stuck with me, and I think I saw it with a bunch of girls and then saw how they were affected by it. So I was just like, oh, this has like this genre specifically does something to the psyche that I think no other genre can really do.
I agree with all that. I was born in 91, so I was there for that whole era of like those movies coming out, and I remember being scared for my life.
Yeah. Yeah. There's just, when you get into realism, I think that just, yeah, unlocks a sort of part of oneself that it's easier to put your shoe, to be in their shoes as characters.
Yeah.
Whereas a movie, you do feel like a voyeur where you're really, separated from it. It's so cinematic, and this is like a piece of art. When found footage comes in, it's like, that's the media that we consume every day or that we film ourselves. Therefore, I think there's just an in that found footage offers to people. And hopefully, we have created with Hunting Matthew Nichols.
You definitely did. And I know kind of like this kind of goes in the realm of Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch and not showing everything at once. And one of my favorite shots and sequences in this film was with you and Ryan kind of looking over that recovered police footage, seeing your actions and seeing what was unfolding. I thought you guys did such a good job there, and it sent chills down my spine. Like you could hear everything, but you couldn't see it. So why do you think it was so much more impactful to do it that way versus showing us what was unfolding?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. That was a very, purposeful decision by me directorially that we've actually had pushback on. That people are like, "Why didn't you show the tape? Show it, show it." And I said, "No, no, no." I made that decision because the imagination is always scarier than what I can show you. I think and again, when I think back to these films that have impacted me, a lot of it is what you can't see. Another great influence to me on that, just that rule, is It Follows, right? Like you don't see what's chasing them, but it's terrifying the entire time. And why? Because you're trying to imagine what that being looks like. And that's what I wanted to do with this, is just like because the imagination of the public within the film was rampant, in the
Hmm.
reality of in Port Rupert there, of what happened to these kids. And so was Tara's imagination of what happened to her brother. I wanted to do that same process with the audience, where you don't really know. And now you're just guessing and wondering what happened. So I think that just plays into two parts. Not showing the monster is always more effective, but also allowing the audience at that point to become part of the mystery and to be left in the dark like the characters were for a while, in order to heighten that mystery and hopefully bring you to the edge of your seat to really try to figure out what, based audio. So it brings different senses
Hmm.
into play at that point in the movie, instead of just being a visual thing. And I think if we end up on streaming with this thing, everybody's on their phones when they watch, these things these days. It's terrible. That's a moment that you have to put down your phone and pay attention, because that's the turning point of the movie, and also something that hopefully engages you in a different way than previous in the movie, the first 30 minutes. Yeah.
I definitely agree. And I think people, I mean, once you hear those sounds coming from the TV, people are going to be glued to it. So
Yeah, hopefully.
there was some incredible cinematography in this and some haunting imagery. So first of all, where was this thing shot? Because Black Bear Forest looked awesome, but it looked like you guys were freezing your butts off.
Yeah, we shot in the middle of December. There was a bunch of locations. We were quite mobile on this project. It ranged from Surrey and Chilliwack and Vancouver itself, and then we actually did go on to Vancouver Island, and we did go to the northern tip of the island because I felt that was important to do. If we're going to set this story on the northern tip of Vancouver Island, we got to go there because it's a
Hmm.
very, very specific landscape up there, and it's very haunting and mysterious naturally. So that is something that we did, and it was cold, it was wet, but that being said, and yes, we were uncomfortable a lot of that time in the forest, but that's the reality again too. I didn't want to fake it in terms of like shooting in the summer, because the dampness and the cold and the wet and the forest to me specifically is already such a character of this film.
Hmm.
And when you capture the Pacific Northwest, that feeling in the middle of the winter is so specific to anybody that's lived up there. I have. um, it's so, yeah, specific, and something that I wanted to capture on film because it's important to the tone and the look of this movie.
You definitely captured it because I love those like those long shots of the forest and then seeing the fog. It just kind of like sucks you into this like creepy setting. And then when you get into the forest and you see what's unfolding, it makes it just 10 times better.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree. Like you can, that's something again you can't fake
No.
or like create. You just have to shoot there. And that was something to me when I moved, because I'm originally from Winnipeg and I moved to Vancouver. So experiencing those Pacific Northwest forests to me as an adult, like I didn't grow up with them. And I remember this feeling when you go out there, or when everybody goes out there, I think is it's very haunting, and it feels heavy, and it feels historic as
Hmm.
opposed to a lot of other forests, especially the ones in the prairies. It's the different feeling in those forests. And I think that's where a lot of our inspiration came from. Sean and I, who's also from Vancouver, is just like, there's a feeling you go when you go in those woods. And to me, those woods have not been captured in this kind of format, in this kind of genre before. There's been a lot of stories elsewhere, but I fought to make sure that this set was set in Vancouver Island for those purposes.
When you did film in the forest, was there anything scary that happened while you were out there?
Um, no,
Good.
no. It was funny. We're in December though, so I think like the funniest thing we had to track was the light, because in December in Vancouver Island, like your sunset starts at 4 p.m.
Hmm.
Your sunrise is like 9 a.m. So there was very, very short windows in order for us to make sure that we got the timeline correct, which ended up in some chaotic shooting, because as soon as that sun starts to go down, you just lose the light. And I'm like, now this doesn't make sense if this is in the dark because we're in the day. Blah, 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 blah. So I would say just
Yep.
like those days in the forest were chaotic, but our ending is chaotic. So hey, there we go.
And that ending was awesome. And speaking of kind of talking about the ending in a little bit, the necklace that Tara wears, her brother gave her, it kind of looked like some type of like a cult symbol. Was there any other meaning besides being like obviously the conduit to help her communicate?
Yeah, so it's the Gaelic Trinity knot. So that was chosen specifically as the symbol because the Trinity knot means birth, living, and death, right?
Hmm.
So that again too is a bit of an Easter egg for what we're about to see in the entire movie. So we chose that specifically, that symbol, because of its meaning, and and it also represents kind of the cycle of life, right? So again, well, hopefully the audience here will
Hmm.
see the movie, and that's a piece of foreshadowing in of itself of what we're about to see.
Okay, I'm glad I caught that thing because I thought it was like an awesome little nod, and I was like, where's he gonna go with this?
Yeah, and I'm glad you're the first person to bring that necklace up, and it's something that I haven't really talked about but has quite a lot of meaning. And we also made the decision, it was a big conversation, to not talk about the symbolism of that necklace and to leave it as just its own Easter egg, because I think if we got into the symbolism of the necklace, it would just be too leading for the audience, right? At that point, it would
Hmm.
just be like, oh, they're pointing this out for a very specific reason because what we're about to see. And I never wanted to go into that land where where the audience got ahead of me, just in terms of what was going to happen. So that was something that we backed off and said, you know what, it's just that necklace and the symbolism is just going to live on its own, and we're not going to touch it. And hopefully people pick up on it.
I love that. I know Halloween's in a few days. We got it in 2 days. You brought up a few other horror movies. So is there one that you always have to watch in October, or an underrated gem that you don't think gets enough love?
I just actually just watched 2003 Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Um, you know,
Great.
uh, so if you want to talk about, like, again, seminal films, horror, that was one. I remember watching it at camp. And when I went to Orthodox Ukrainian camp growing up, and that was one of like the forbidden films that were like in the art room that we got to watch, us older kids. And
Hmm.
that movie just stuck with me. And I love it. I know it's a remake and the original is better, don't get me wrong. But again, it's putting myself in that, whatever, what as I 10-year-old Markian self, that movie stuck with me. So I actually just watched that a couple of days ago. That one's one I return to pretty often. And then I'm also a classic Halloween, like, the Michael Myers, that number one, to me is just, it's so good. And the original Friday the 13th, because I remember, again, kid stuff. It always comes back to the kid.
Hmm.
I remember watching those on Spike TV when they would do these Halloween marathons. And I would just watch it. I remember like my mom was in the kitchen and I'm just watching like Friday the 13th, and just like my mom's like, you shut that off. And so I think a bit of this always felt forbidden to me. These movies felt forbidden. And like that I get to like see them, and they're murdery and creepy. And that always, I guess, tantalized me in a way that has stuck with me clearly, because I return to them often, and I just love how those movies present horror. And a lot of them are, and I think why it influenced me in this movie, a lot of them are slower burns.
Hmm.
Back in the day, in cinema in the 70s and 80s, those slasher films took a while to ramp up, and the suspense and the drama. And I think we've lost a bit of that in this YouTube, TikTok, Instagram era, where you see the slashers these days is literally the opening scene now.
Yeah.
It's just like, wow, right off the bat. And you're like, whoa, whoa, geez, I didn't even have a chance to catch my breath. And so, yeah, using that attitude is definitely also how we built out Hunting Matthew Nichols.
I love that. And yeah, the new that Texas Chainsaw is honestly fantastic. And sometimes there are days, and it's a hot take, I think it's better than the original.
Oh,
So
all right, Kay. I'm glad you said it. It's not me. I didn't
yeah.
want to get in any hot water with anybody here, but okay, I'm with you. I'm with you on that. All right. That's when I said the original's better, because that's
Yep.
what everybody says when you say 2003's is the best installment in that series. Everyone says, no, no, you're crazy. And I'm like, okay.
I get that. My friend group always gives me shit for it. So, last
Great.
question I have here for you. Is there anything you want people to know about, this movie before they dive into it?
Man, no, not really.
Yeah.
It's like I just hope that audiences don't do a lot of research and just experience the film kind of blind. I think that's the best way to take it in. You can come and join us online, huntingmatthewnichols.com, check out our Instagram handles, get a lot of like information about the film. And but I honestly, I just encourage everybody to just come in with an open mind, and take in the movie. When people ask me before film festivals or something, or say, what's it about? I just say, just come
Hmm.
see. It's a documentary that gets a little intense. And that's all I want to say about it. And I let the audience go on its own journey and own experience with the film, because I think that's the most fun and the most surprising way to enter our movie.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I had an absolute blast getting to chat with you, and I can't wait for more people to see this thing. It's awesome.
Thank you. I really, I don't take those compliments lightly at this point. So thank you for saying all those nice things about it. I'm glad you enjoyed it. And yeah, I'm just excited to share this. So everybody take Seth's recommendation. Watch our movie.
Please do.